Welcome to another 15-minute masterclass. Today we are tackling the ultimate life hack for row counting, pattern repeats, and keeping your knitting chaos under control, running markers. If you've ever stared at your knitting like it's speaking a foreign language, unsure if you've crossed that cable yet or how many rows it's been since your last increase, this video's for you. Running markers are so simple and so genius, you'll wonder how you ever lived without them. And no, you don't need fancy tools, just some leftover yarn and a willingness to stop pretending that you will remember where you left off. I'm talking to you. Let's get to it before the dog decides that he'd rather go for a walk. There are many, many ways to keep track of your rows. Counters, a pen, an app, or whatever this is. You may have a favorite that works for you to count rows, but what if I told you there's a way to track rows, stitches, increases, decreases, and all types of repeats, and you already have what you need to do it? Oh, and have you ever exploded your brain trying to figure out if the stitches on the needle count as a row? Been there. The magic solution to all of this? Running markers. I learned this amazing practice from Stephanie Pearl McPhee, and trust me, it's a game changer. Sound good? Needles up, let's get to class. Let's be honest, traditional row counting tools, not so great. You've got little clicky count, or the ones that you can click with your thumb, and sure, they're fine, they do the job until you forget to click them, or your dog runs off with them. Not mentioning any names, Oscar. Digital counters, fancy, but what happens when it resets in your overstuffed project bag? And look at this ridiculous thing with rotating dials. I'm pretty techie, but this thing, I have no clue. The problem with all of these tools is that they only track one thing at a time, and they're not foolproof. That's why running markers are my go-to. They're simple, versatile, and pretty much impossible to mess up. Let's just talk for a bit about why they're so great. A running marker is nothing more than a strand of yarn that you weave in and out of your knitting as you go. No batteries, no clicking, just scrap yarn. This is my running marker stash. You want to be just a smidge mindful when you're selecting a yarn to use as a running marker. Pick something relatively smooth in a contrasting color to your project so that it's easy to see. Avoid really dark yarns on light knits because they might bleed, and you'll find that out pretty quickly when you block your swatch. Try to stay as close to the weight that you're knitting with as you can. Ideally about one weight thinner. If it's too thick, it's going to push your stitches around, and if it's too thin, it's going to escape really easily. Ask me how I know. In reality, of course, you can grab whatever you happen to have handy. It's not going to be the end of the world, I promise. Here is a rapid fire list of what running markers can do for you. Count rows accurately. Track pattern repeats like cables or lace, multiple repeats. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can keep tabs on shaping increases and decreases. You can measure tricky areas without relying on rulers. And the dreaded at the same time, where any combination of those might be happening all at once. If you need to seam two edges together and you run a running marker flipping in and out every 5 rows, you'll have a great visual to help you join that seam evenly. And I know that mattress stitch will effectively do the same thing for you, but there's a bit of comfort in being able to see as you go that you are lining that seam up row for row. You can use it to help pick up stitches evenly around an edge, neckline, sleeve, front of a cardigan. If you just set a running marker about every 10 stitches or so to break up that pickup edge into manageable parts, it will make picking up stitches along that edge super easy. And, of course, for easily measuring your gauge on your perfectly knit and blocked swatches. Remember last week's class? No? No worries. There will be a link at the end of this video. Now let's take a look at how to put them in and use them. If you were around for last week's masterclass, you got a little sneak peek at this, but let's take a second look at it. Running markers are ridiculously simple. Really, all you're doing is taking a contrast strand of yarn and you're going to drop it into your work between two stitches. You get to decide where you want to put it. And then you're going to knit rows. How many rows you knit is entirely up to you. I usually like to knit 5 if I'm just counting rows, but I will knit other quantities of rows depending on what I'm tracking. For instance, if I'm tracking a cable repeat that's every 6 rows or every 8 rows, I will only flip my marker every 6 or 8 rows. Or I might be tracking increases or decreases every 4, 6, 8, 10 rows, and I will flip my marker according to those decreases. So here it is. How do I know when I have knit 5 rows, Nicole? Here's how you know. You pull these stitches apart and you count the strands in between them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those strands are called courses. And as you can see, this strand at the top is connected to the stitch that is on the needle. So the answer to that question is yes, the stitch on the needle counts. That top strand is the stitch on the needle. So in this particular case, I have knit my way back to the same space where I first dropped my running marker, and I have knitted 5 rows as we just counted. So all I'm going to do is flip my marker to the front and carry on knitting rows. And yes, you'll notice I'm knitting into the back of these stitches. That is because I am a combination knitter. I have a class on that too, if you're curious about it. Now we just continue knitting another 5 rows. Every once in a while, I will pull my stitches apart a bit and count how many rows I've done. When I get to 5, 6, 8, however many I need, I will then flip the marker between the stitches to the back again. That's it. That's how you use a running marker vertically. I want to give you a quick demo of how you can also use it horizontally. All right. Let's pretend we are about to cast on 300 stitches. Now, how many times have you done this and gone back and recounted those stitches over and over and over again because you keep losing track? Watch this. It will never happen again. I've got a slip knot on my needle. I'm now going to just quickly cast on. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I find it easiest to do this in 10s. You can do it in any breakdown you like, but I find 10s are easy for counting. And then all you're going to do is drop that marker between the needle and the yarn, and then carry on doing another 10, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you take the marker, swing it forward, drop it between the needle and the yarn, and carry on again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. And this time bring it from the back to the front. and off you go. So as you can see, you only ever have to count to 10. 10, 20, 30. I already know I have 30 stitches. It's an accurate count. I do not have to go back and count these stitches again. And I'm telling you, for casting on large amounts of stitches, this has changed my life. No exaggeration. I also wanted to show you how to secure the marker so that it doesn't accidentally fall out on you. As you can imagine, these little suckers can slide right out when you don't want them to. Ask me how I know. There are lots of ways to do this, but here's what I like to do. I tie a little loop down at the starting end of the marker. And then you can take any kind of locking stitch marker, a plain little bulb, a little plastic locking stitch marker, or you can go super fancy like this guy I've got here. Whatever shakes your martini, and just hook it through the loop and then attach it to your work. And voila! That marker is going nowhere. If you're going to be taking this and stuffing it in that overstuffed project bag I showed you earlier, you can also secure it to the top of your work if you like. That way you know that your markers will stay in place until you are done with them. Here are a few real-life examples of how running markers come into play. On this particular sweater, which is Grace Notes by Joji Locatelli, one of my very favorite sweaters, I used running markers for a number of purposes. I used them to track the 12-row cable repeat, and another running marker to track the decreases in the neckline, and a third running marker to track my number of rows in the armhole area. It made doing all of this at the same time business super easy, and I knew it was going to be exactly the same on this side and on this side. Now, this fabulous sweater that I'm wearing, which is Patty Lyons' Affinknity cardigan, has a lot going on, and I had started it and then abandoned it for several months. But thanks to running markers, when I picked it up again, I knew exactly where I was. No guessing, no need to frog, no studying the pattern for hours, no stress. And just in case I haven't convinced you yet, here's another bonus. Running markers can replace measuring for areas like armholes. If your pattern says knit until the armhole measures 8 inches, don't measure. Use your row gauge. And you know your row gauge because you made a correctly knit, washed, blocked, and measured swatch, right? If you're getting 5 rows to the inch on your swatch and you need 8 inches, that's 40 rows. Drop a running marker on the same row where you do your initial armhole bind off. Then just flip that marker back and forth every 5 rows until you have 40, and you have made a perfectly accurate armhole depth. And it's going to be exactly the same on the other side. And there we have it, running markers. The simple, versatile hack that will transform your knitting. And I'm not kidding. Say goodbye to whatever this is, pages of indecipherable notes, and say hello to a strand of yarn and stress-free, accurate knitting. So on the off chance that you found this tip helpful, boop that likes up button, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and let me know in the comments if you've used running markers, if you're going to use running markers, and how you like to track rows. In the meantime, keep those needles clicking. Here's the link to the first 15-minute masterclass on swatching. And if you think you already know everything about swatching, you don't. I say goodbye, Oscar says goodbye, and we really look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.